why did you, or how did you come to start your podcast? And uh,
It's actually a very easy answer. And I give a walking tour in Beirut. It's called Walk Beirut. And
oh,
maybe you've heard of it, or maybe
I've heard it.
yeah.
Yes.
And in the old days, I mean, a while ago, uh, I used to start at the banyan tree between
Hmm.
Bliss and Medical Gate, just
Yep.
that tree at the corner,
Yep.
right? So, I mean, it's a very obvious intersection, and there's that giant banyan tree that's technically outside of AUB's campus. It's, I
Yep.
think, the only one that's not on campus. Exact, yeah. I used to start there. And I started there because I was trying to tell a very long story of Beirut's history. And I thought the best starting point, the best meeting point, would be under a giant tree offering some shade, a tree of knowledge. And that is literally the tree of knowledge. The banyan tree is meant to be the tree of knowledge. Branches that grow horizontally, roots that grow horizontally. It's a very horizontal tree. And I loved the shade. I loved looking up at times while talking to big groups. I loved hearing the birds chirping. And I loved the story of AUB and why that banyan tree is even there, and why there are obscure trees of knowledge in Beirut to begin with. So I started with Daniel Bliss's story and the planting of these trees and the foundation of modern Lebanon, really, the Syrian Protestant College. And I used to always turn to, I used to hear his voice sometimes, Kamel Salibi, the historian who wrote The House of Many
Yeah.
Mansions,
Yeah.
and AUB's probably the most important professor. I rented a room in one of his old buildings on Sedet. His nephew became a friend, and I got to meet Kamel Salibi. And I thought, this man is so interesting. He can be offensive, he can be harsh, and he can be hilarious. And I think he was in his 70s then, so he had already left AUB. But I got the chance to listen to him talking about AUB, talking about Beirut, and I loved it. I loved listening to this man share his opinions on everything Ras Beirut. I got to know Samir Khalaf as well, who,
Hmm.
up until not that long ago, was still part of AUB. Well, Samir Khalaf is Ras Beirut. I mean, he's an encyclopedia on Ras Beirut. And I thought, okay, let me start the story here under this beautiful banyan tree, tree of knowledge. Let me end the story underneath a different tree. It's not the banyan tree. And downtown, next to Nahar, there's the Samir Asir Garden.
Oh yeah.
And his statue is sitting underneath these two giant, I think they're ficus trees, or I don't know the exact name, but they look like a banyan tree. They're huge. I thought, you know what? That's the story. 1860s until 2005. Daniel Bliss to Samir Asir. That's 150 years of storytelling. So that's how I started the tour. And when I had to stop giving the tour, I just remembered thinking about that tree always. And by the time I came back to Beirut during the tour again, I changed the location of where to start. And, that intersection is so off-putting because of the noise and people parking next to the tree. Security became very relaxed. You could just park. It became dangerous to gather people there. But I always thought about that tree. And then, when I started doing the podcast, I'm like, let me go back to where I started, symbolically. Let me go back to the stories that I used to share at the beginning. So that's the perfect place. So I called it the Beirut Banyan after that tree. And I still think, and people disagree at times, but that's fine. I think Ras Beirut is an experiment that we should all be proud of, because it's the only place I know in the Middle East today where you can have a feel of what it's like to be an Eastern Mediterranean cosmopolitan person, where your religion doesn't come first, where your background matters less than your contribution, and you can wander the streets of Hamra and Ras Beirut and really forget that you're in the middle of a huge mess. That it's sort of it's a little bubble, and it's contained, and it shrinks and it shrinks and it shrinks. But there's expression there that I love, and there's individuality that I really love. And I don't feel that in other parts of Lebanon, or for that matter, the Middle East. So I love what Ras Beirut at least pretends to be, and I love those trees.